right, welcome back to our Chapter 2 video. We're going to be talking today about data in context. I love this line from your book, data is meaningless without context. We can't just have numbers or information, we have to know where it came from. So we're going to be looking for 6 things that your book calls the W's. Who, what, where, when, why, and hiding down here, how. So I'm going to define each one of these for you, explain what we're looking for, and then we're going to take a look at 2 examples. So when it says who, these are the things that we're gathering data about. Now, this is not who gathered the data, but instead who we're gathering data about. And I'll try to make that difference really clear when we get to our examples. When I say what, these are the variables, the data we actually gathered. We defined variables previously as characteristics or attributes that vary or differ from person to person. So we're thinking Q or C. Are they the quantitative pieces of data or the categorical? When I say where and when, I really mean where and when. Like, where on the planet Earth did you find this information, and when, like a year or a time period. Next, we see why as well as how. Why becomes important to understand maybe the purpose or the goal of gathering this data. Really, why did we bother? And how. If I had to pick one to be the most important piece of context, surprisingly, I would pick how. This will become very important later on. So I really mean, how did we get the data? I know that may seem strange to be important now, but later on, the how will tell us what we can and cannot do with our data. So those are our 6 W's. Let's check out our first example. We've seen this story before, the Consumer Reports article on energy bars, and it's giving us brand name, flavor, price, number of calories, grams of protein, and fat. So when it asks who, it's the person or things I'm gathering data about. I'm gathering data about energy bars. As simple as that. Different kinds of energy bars. What data I'm gathering? These would be my variables. We identified these already, but I'll point them out again. Brand name is a variable. It's different from energy bar to energy bar. Flavor. Price. The number of calories. The number, or I guess grams of protein. And grams of fat. Those are all my variables. I'm not going to go through and mark quantitative or categorical, since we've already done that for this example. Where? Well, where are these energy bars? Some of you might be thinking grocery store. Okay, I'd like to be a little more specific. I don't know if these were energy bars sold in Utah, across the country. It really doesn't say. So I'm going to explain that. It doesn't say. My fancy way of writing, it doesn't say, is to just say it's not specified. The story problem does not explain to me. The same is true of when. That is not specified. It doesn't say if this data was gathered in 2011 to make it really recent. It doesn't say if it was gathered back in 1995. That's what I've got, is no information. The why can be one of the most challenging questions. As I read through that story problem, it does not tell me why I gathered information about energy bars. All I know is that it was a Consumer Reports article. So, well, I'm going to use what I know about Consumer Reports. Consumer Reports are for consumers, people who use these things. So if they're giving me an article about energy bars, it's probably so that as a consumer, I can make some decisions about which energy bar to buy. Maybe based on the price, maybe based on the amount of protein or the amount of fat. So this is really for consumers to compare the energy bars. That's the purpose. It didn't say that. So I had to do a little bit of thinking. And the last question is how? How did they get this information about the energy bars? How did they get the brand name? How did they get the price? How did they find out how much protein was in it? It doesn't say, not specified. However, because this is such an important piece of information, I am going to do a little bit of thinking, maybe a little bit of guessing. So maybe they went to the store and read the labels. You know, drive down to Walmart, write down how much it costs, write down on the back of the label how much protein's in it. Maybe they tested it. Maybe they actually took those energy bars to a scientist who measured the amount of protein inside. I don't know, melt it down. So I'm going to come up with at least some ideas. And that is my context. Now I'm going to point out a couple places where I see lots of mistakes. On who, a lot of students like to tell me who gathered the data. So they say Consumer Reports, because that's who has the information. Remember, who is not who gathered. It's what is my data about. The brand name belongs to the energy bars, and the flavor, and the price, etc. The other problem I see is on the where. A lot of students like to say, well, it was found in Consumer Reports, because that's the name of the article. I don't want to know where you found the data. I want to know where it came from originally. So again, that blue would be the incorrect answers. Let's check out one more example. Again, we've seen this particular story about the Boston Marathon, gathering information on runners. So I would invite you actually to pause the video at this time and attempt to answer those 6 W's, and then go back and compare your answers with mine. And I'll go ahead and fill those in now. Who? I gathered information about runners. Now, I can be more specific. These are Boston Marathon runners. And the more specific I can be, the better. And what information did I gather? Well, I gathered their gender, their country, their age, and the time it took them to run the marathon. Where? Where did I gather this information? Well, I'm going to guess that the Boston Marathon takes place in Boston. When? It doesn't have a year or even a time period listed, so I'm just going to write not specified. Not specified. Why? Why did they get the gender and country and age and time for all of these people? Well, one idea would be to report the race results. That's one idea. It doesn't specifically say in the story problem, so I'm just thinking about why it might be useful, what their purpose might be. Gathering the gender, country, and age might even just be to compare year to year what kinds of people are running the marathon. And lastly, how they got this information. Again, that's not listed in the story problem, but I'm at least going to make a guess. How is so important that I should at least make a guess. So maybe they got the gender and country and age from the registration forms. Right? Each runner has to sign up. So from the registration form. All right, so that concludes our discussion today about the context of data.